Okay, everybody, welcome to part two of this discussion, The Twisted Philosophy of Sabbatai Zevi. Zevi lived in the Jewish community of Smyrna in Turkey, as I mentioned. Evidently, he was talented enough to have been given the title Shakam, which he was still, when he was still quite young. By the time he was 18, he was teaching Kabbalah to groups of young men and was given a certain amount of recognition for his evident proficiency and knowledge thereabout. Anyway, he had immersed himself in the study of Kabbalah and manifested an extraordinary imagination in providing interpretations along Kabbalistic lines. A lot of Jews have always been intrigued with that. A lot of Gentiles, too. And it's just, again, Jedi mind trickery, right? It's just complete bullshit. The Kabbalah is the biggest collection of garbage. Once again, all they did was take ideas from other nations and just twist and contort it. And they have fooled people all through the ages into thinking that they had mystical powers when they would, for example, predict something, and then later it would come to pass because they had the means to make things happen, right? The same with Bible prophecy. God almighty. Half the time, though, the Bible didn't even predict anything. They just made it out like it did, right? They just twist passages and make it look like it's a prophecy. But nevertheless, on the occasion where the Bible did make a prophecy, it's a very general thing. It's something that could easily be made to happen. Just like Jesus, riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. It was said that the Messiah would do that, right? Oh, like that couldn't be made to happen. Give me a break. So stupid. But anyways, nevertheless, Bible dupes, Jew and Gentile alike, get all excited, enamored over stuff like that. Jesus had to be the Messiah. He fulfilled this prophecy. And so it was with Mr. Zevi. He was twisting the Kabbalah, making it out like he had divine powers and making all these claims. Don't forget, in the first part one of this video, I talked about how he had his dupes convinced he could fly. And then when asked, "Oh, can you demonstrate, great master, how you fly?" "Well, God doesn't want anyone to see it." "Oh, okay. Doesn't want anyone to see he can fly." Fucking stupid bastards that fall for this shit. Anyway, from the very beginning of his career, the charismatic features of his personality were evident. Usually, losers like this are very flamboyant in their personality, in their addresses to the public, charismatic speakers. Look at Mr. Adolf. That usually sucks people in. It gets them all excited. It's not even what they do. It's what they say. "I like the way he talks." Look at Dumpy, right? Look at his fan club. They love what he says. And sure, a lot of what he says, not everything. Some of the stuff he says is downright fucking stupid. But nevertheless, a lot of what he says, sounds good, right? And that's all that seems to matter with people. The follower mentality just loves a good speech, right? Doesn't matter what the asshole actually does. And so it was with this bastard. It should go without saying that Zevi was also heavily into the Talmud. Yeah. And this is what the whole Zevi movement has always been about. Marrying the Torah with the Talmud. They recognized that a lot of Jews of that day had rejected the Talmud. had rejected the Kabbalah and were only following the Torah. Again, not like there's a difference, right? But the Torah is a slightly tempered down version of the Talmud. In reality, the Torah preceded the Talmud, and so the Talmud was a more aggressive version of the Torah, right? It was more blatantly evil. But the evils that are in the Talmud all stemmed from what's in the Torah. Nevertheless, a lot of Jews were resistant to the Talmud because, well, for one thing, the Talmud introduces a lot of stuff that isn't in the Torah. And so, that's heresy. This isn't in harmony with what Moses taught. And this is why a lot of Christians, of course, reject these other Jewish writings. They only accept the Torah from the Jews, right? Because that's the original inspired by Yahweh. And there's a lot of much more blatantly immoral stuff in the Talmud. So Christians, think they have a strong footing when they say, "Oh yes, I know about the Talmud and the Kabbalah. I know that's all evil. It's heathen." And yet, all the while, they give a free ride to the evil shit that's in the Torah itself. And so this is what was going on in Judaism. They had a slightly higher moral standard, and they couldn't be brought around to serve the interest of the elite Jews in screwing people over with their banking enterprises or infiltrating governments to take them down. They couldn't do that so easily with them. So this is why Sabbatai came along to introduce real Judaism. They had strayed away with this Moses moral stuff, right? Seriously, that's what was going on here. So Zevi was trying to, he wasn't introducing anything new. He was trying to resurrect what Judaism had always been about. Too many Jews had strayed. Don't forget, they hated Moses. The third faction hated Moses in this idea of religion, with morality. They would compromise with Moses once in a while. I mean, with the Moses philosophy, the priesthood, right? If the royal line was being a pain in the ass, vice versa. Sometimes they would correspond better with the royal line against the priesthood. And you can see this, as I pointed out recently, with the infighting stuff, right? It's kind of humorous to read the Old Testament because one minute, this passage over here is condemning the temple priesthood for worshiping false idols, right? The next minute, it's condemning the king. The king is, bringing Yahweh's vengeance upon us because he has worshipped other gods. It's back and forth. One minute, the temple priesthood is being condemned because the third faction was allying themselves with the royal line, against the priesthood. The next minute, it's the royal line that's being condemned because the third faction was getting the priesthood, to worship idols. Back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, armed with that understanding, you can finally make sense now of what's going on. Sometimes it was both the priesthood and the royal line. They were both worshiping idols. That's when, the third faction was infiltrating both, trying to take the whole damn thing down. That was an early attempt at what they later did in more recent centuries, right? Warring against the kings and emperors of Europe and the popes to take them both down so they could emerge as the big man on campus. And it did finally work. They didn't quite get what they wanted in ancient times in the Bible. They tried, but they finally did get what they wanted, in the past few centuries, guys. All of the revolutions that were launched took out, stripped the royal bloodline of its power. And, of course, the Reformation took a while, but they finally stripped the popes of their power as well. So that now, the power that is bringing about the New World Order is the third faction, the secret societies. Anyway, as I was saying, it should go without saying that Zevi was also heavily into the Talmud. His father enrolled him in a yeshiva under the rabbi of Smyrna, Joseph uh, Escapa, sounds like a Sephardic Jew, where he first became acquainted with the Talmud. Studies in halacha, or Jewish law, did not appeal to him, however, but apparently Zevi did attain proficiency in the Talmud and the Zohar as well, so he could speak, the language fluently to impress people, but that wasn't his thing. He was much more into the Kabbalah and mysticism, typical third factioner, claiming to be the Messiah. It's almost always a third factioner that has claimed to be the Messiah all through the ages, right? Not someone from the priestly line, someone from the third faction line that had no interest whatsoever in religion, but would use it to bring people around to join what was ultimately an insurrectionist movement. And that's what Zevi was, or attempted to be anyway, on several occasions. He attempted uprisings, right? Revolutions, or civil wars or whatever. That was his aim. A big power grab, and that's what Christ's aim was too. Think not that I've come to bring peace, but a sword. He was really letting his hair down there. Anyway, so Zevi's first love was definitely the Kabbalah, classic third factionist. Zevi suffered 2 marriage annulments, as it turns out, because of his inability or lack of desire to engage in sexual communion of his marriages. But the truth is, he was, again, a rabid homosexual, so he had no genuine desire for women. He would just get married, for window dressing purposes. A lot of politicians today, right? They're not interested in their wives, even if they are heterosexual or bisexual. They just get married for political reasons. Look at Billy Boy and Hillary, right? Hillary didn't care about him running around with women. She only cared that the public would find out and embarrass her. That's why she would get upset with him. They were probably sharing girlfriends back and forth. Anyway, so yeah, he was a rabid homosexual, and his marriages, again, were simply designed to hide that fact. That was a scandal at the time. His third wife, Sarah, was actually a prostitute who traveled about the world in search of the Messiah and claimed that she had found him in Zevi. So she had ulterior motives for marrying him too, just that she wanted to ride on his coattails into glory. Anyway, although Jewish, she had been raised in a Christian convent, part of her cover, no doubt. She openly declared that since she could not marry until she had been received by the Messiah, God had authorized her to satisfy her passions as she could until the Messiah arrived. So that's why she was a prostitute. So here you have the idea of salvation through sin, right? She was practicing that very thing. No wonder they got along so good. She was indulging in the prostitution lifestyle because she said God allotted her to do that until the Messiah, until he would bring the true Messiah into her life. Anyway, Zevi married her after she had thus presented herself to him, and presumably she continued to have sexual relations after the marriage with various youthful followers of his, which he didn't object to, because, of course, he taught the idea of salvation through sin, number one, and number two, he wasn't interested in women anyway. She was just there for window dressing purposes, they probably shared men back and forth. Oh, he's a classic Jew, wasn't he? Anyway, following his utterance of God's name in the synagogue, as I mentioned in part 1, he actually pronounced the name Yahweh or whatever. You weren't supposed to do that. There was a ban that was pronounced against him by the rabbis of Smyrna, because this was considered heresy. This occurred sometime around 1651. His followers were impressed with it. They thought that was assurance that he was the Messiah. But no, other rabbis saw it as heresy. They saw him as the huckster that he was, and they weren't impressed. Don't forget, these were rabbis that largely, some of them were probably into the Kabbalah to some degree, but a lot of times that was done secretly. Openly practicing the Kabbalah was forbidden, right? You're only supposed to practice the Torah, Moses. It took a while for that to really catch on, and Zevi played a big role in that. Anyway, but in the meantime, in the Christian world, there were a lot of Kabbalists, again, secretly doing so, but there were a lot of priests, popes that were into the Kabbalah. The third faction was using that as a means to take them down, too. Anyway, this ban on him was partly motivated by his large popularity among the lower classes and the fact that his presence seemed to lead them to acts of insubordination. They recognized that he was a Jesus-type character. He's stirring up the rabble, the Jewish rabble. Really, what they were afraid of more than anything was that he was going to take away followers from them. They didn't want competition. And they were also afraid that, he was going to probably try to launch an insurrection, and they didn't want the backlashes of that to come to them either, which is why the Jewish leaders in Christ's day hated him. The real Christ being, again, Judas Christus. So anyway, Mr. Zevi left Smyrna. He was banished by the other rabbis and traveled very widely. Constantinople, Salonika, Cairo, Gaza, Aleppo, and Jerusalem, during which time he was selling himself as the Messiah everywhere he went and gaining more and more followers, and thus more fat wads of cash. In Salonika, he requested that his marriage with the Torah be celebrated. So check it out. He didn't care about the Torah, but he knew a lot of Jews did, and he knew that was the way to lure them in. So he was acting like being the Messiah sent from God. God wants you to follow all of these sacred Jewish texts. So he was, trying to revive old world Judaism, the original Judaism, right? Occultism and lack of morality with this document that, even though it's tremendously immoral itself, the Torah, it has moral standards in it. And so he had to use that. He had to wed that with his original third faction Jewish philosophy to lure people in, to lure a lot of Jews in. In Constantinople, he carried a fish in a baby basket and indicated that the redemption would come under the zodiacal sign of Pisces, which is interesting because that was traditionally the symbol of Christianity. Was he also trying to wed, as an ecumenist, Christianity in with, this original form of Judaism that he was reviving? Certainly looks that way. He also did that with Islam, right? Of course, he had to save his ass to claim he was converting to Islam. But at the same time, he must have reasoned, hey, this isn't just a compromise to save my ass. I can bring about a revival of third faction Kabbalah teachings within Islam as well. I think that's what his aim was. Anyway, wherever he went, his charismatic personality, and don't forget, the Kabbalah was catching on at this time, big time in Christianity. Anyway, wherever he went, his charismatic personality attracted people and had convinced them that he was indeed the Messiah. Again, just the way he spoke, right? This is what lures people in. They don't look at the person's track record. Never mind what he's done in the past. They don't even look at the present. And if they see something that's amiss, or if people point out to them something that's amiss, they'll brush it off. They'll make excuses up for it, just like Trump-tards do, right? You try to tell them, but don't you realize this, that, this, that? They just write it off. You bring up the COVID shit. Oh, well, that was Fauci. Fauci tricked him. Oh, cut the fucking shit, man. Anyway, in the years from 1648 to 1665, various rumors and legends grew up around Zevi's personality, around his personhood, hyperbolic crap that, he made up stuff about himself, right? That he could fly, but his followers were making up stuff and adding to the prestige of this man, so that people became even more enamored with him without him having to make up bullshit. People were doing it for him. When he returned to Smyrna in 1665, he was received by large numbers of people with great demonstration in the streets. So now, a lot of the rabbis were probably more likely to back down, right? Because they saw that he had become so popular now. And he felt confident at this point, because of his great popularity, that he could go back to Smyrna, where he had been banished from, without having to worry about the local rabbinate. The Jewish masses fell into religious ecstasies when he arrived. By and large, the Jews of Smyrna were now ready to receive him as the Messiah. This is the game Christ played, right? By challenging the authority of the Pharisees and the scribes right in the temple, by cracking the whip, right? He was hoping that was going to get people allied. Wow, he dare challenge them? This must be the Messiah. And it did work at first, right? They hailed him when he marched through the streets, riding on the jackass riding on the back of the jackass, right? It did work at first. They were hailing him as, king, right? They were waving palm branches in the streets, singing Hosanna. So he thought, damn, this is working perfect, exactly as I had planned, But of course, once he got arrested, now they realized, oh shit, if he was the Messiah, that wouldn't have been possible. An army of angels would have taken over that garrison, So then they backed away. His plan went belly up. He didn't anticipate such a large group coming to arrest him. Anyway, so that's what this little bastard was doing. He would never have gone back to Smyrna unless he was convinced that he would have such a following that the rabbinate wouldn't dare say anything against him and try to banish him again. He was surely doing this as revenge against the rabbinical community there, to snub this right under their noses, right? Ha ha! Look at the following I have. Just try banishing me again. I dare you. Anyway, while back in Smyrna, Samuel Primo, I mentioned him in the last video, had become Zevi's personal secretary, and as such, he directed the following circular to all of the Jews in the region. In the name of this messianic claimant, he wrote this, quote, "The first begotten Son of God, Sabbatai Zevi, Messiah and Redeemer of the people of Israel, to all the sons of Israel, peace." Did you catch that? Look at the titles he afforded him here. The first begotten Son of God. That was a title afforded to Christ in the New Testament, right? The first begotten. Sabbatai Zevi, Messiah and Redeemer of the people of Israel. Anyway, he said, since you have been deemed worthy to behold the great day and the fulfillment of God's word, by the prophets. Your lament and sorrow must be changed into joy, and your fasting into merriment. For you shall weep no more. Rejoice with song and melody, and change the day formerly spent in sadness and sorrow into a day of jubilee, because I have appeared. Oh, please. And so everybody got all excited over this. Oh, they were shedding tears of joy, when in fact nothing had changed in their life, right? Just the illusion from the words that were carefully chosen by this monkey and the charismatic preaching of Zevi himself. That's all that changed their, illusion of happiness. Anyway, but notice, guys, he's called Redeemer. He's called First Begotten Son of God. How Jewish a title is that? Some people might say, oh, he was just borrowing from Christianity. Christianity is Judaism. Those titles applied to Christ are as Jewish as you can get. He was just using old Jewish titles and applying them once again to this new Messiah. Anyway. But notice how the Jewish people of Smyrna were being prompted to pledge full support to this loser, as was the case, again, with Christ, and all with the hope of Israel being set up, as the Jews had always hoped it would be, as the center of world government, Jerusalem, right? The restoration of the alleged throne of David. That's what this man's mission was all about. It wasn't religious, guys. He was using religion as the ultimate aim of political power. That's what Christ and all the other first century characters were all about. The insurrectionists, the messianic claimants, political power. Of course, to not arouse suspicion, Christ is said to have told Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." Oh, bullshit. Later on in the book of Acts, don't forget, the disciples asked Christ, "Lord, are you going to restore Israel at this time?" That's what it was all about. And they understood that that was what it was all about. He would just say things like that, or Judas Crestus would just say things like that to Pilate so that he wouldn't be suspicious that that was, in fact, what he was all about. That's what all the messianic figures were all about, guys. Using religion. Okay, you like that Torah crap? All right, I'll give you Torah. Jesus praised the Torah constantly, right? Not only so the people would rally behind him, but also so that he could get the people to look down at the scribes and Pharisees, because they weren't following the Torah. They were following Talmudic traditions. The teachings of the Pharisees is what later became the Talmud, right? When it finally got written down. But, that's what he was denouncing. Did he care? Did he really care? No, he didn't give a shit. But he knew the people cared, right? And so he was making them look bad by waving the Torah in the air. Oh, he studied the Torah. He knew it well, so that he could do shit like this. So he could quote from it and denounce them to get the people turned against them and allied with himself instead, and ultimately as a weapon to get them rallied behind his insurrectionist movement. You see how crafty these fucks have always been? And now Zevi here comes along and he's doing the exact same thing, and he's being given the same exact titles. So obvious, guys, once you understand Jew think and third faction, think particularly, which is real Jew think. This is real Judaism right here at its finest. Anyway, but, the irony is a lot of Jews viewed him then, and the real conservative Jews, the Torah-only Jews, consider Zevi a heretic, when in fact he was pure Judaism at its finest, right? That's real Judaism. You got to love it. Anyway, news of Sabbatai Zevi and the spirit generated by him had traveled all throughout Europe as a fire across the plain within Judaism, right? He was the talk of the day. Everybody was enamored with him, talking about him. And of course, now fear was being evoked among the rabbinate, right? They were afraid that this guy was going to do the typical messianic thing and turn the people against them. Since the year 1648 had failed to produce the redemption as they claimed was prophesied, right? Sabbatai Zevi placed his faith on another year, which paradoxically had a source quite different than the Kabbalah. Zevi had heard from his father, who was an agent for an English firm, that some Christian calculation based on the book of Revelation had assigned 1666 as the beginning of the millennium, a concept known as English millennialism. So he decided to go with that. So you see what he was doing. He was, once again, introducing this idea of ecumenism. He was taking Christian concepts. Don't forget, he used the fish in a basket as one of his symbols, right? He was hoping not only to bring all the Jewish community around into embracing his mixture of Kabbalah and Torah, but even the Christian world, even the Muslim world. He was hoping, this was the Christian tactic, right? This is what was done in the first century, where Christianity was blending Christian ideas with pagan ideas to get everyone on board. This is what Zevi was doing too. He was hoping this was going to become a full-blown insurrectionist movement, and he was a third factioner, right? So that this would be what would take down finally the power of the church, the power of the emperors. His movement would grow so big, not just among Jews, among Christians and Muslims as well. Didn't quite go the way he wanted, but he had hope that this was going to happen. He saw the big following he was amassing. Anyway, so now the year 1666 was the redemption year instead of 1648. How classic. We see this in Christianity in the 19th century, right? Adventism did it. They said 1844 was going to be the year Jesus came. And when that came and went and nothing happened, they call it the Great Disappointment. They just, some gave up the whole idea and crawled back under their rock and were embarrassed. But some, like what became the Adventist movement, there's the Seventh-day Adventist movement, and then there's just the plain Adventist church. They're not as big, but there still are Adventist churches that don't keep the Sabbath, Sabbath. So they're not called Seventh-day Adventists. But they grew out of the same movement, and they believe that instead of the second coming, something else transpired. Adventism claims that the judgment, the pre-Advent judgment, a term they made up, had occurred then. We got the date right, but the event wrong. It's the same with Jehovah's Witnesses, right? First, Charles Russell said Jesus was going to come in 1874. When that didn't happen, then he changed the date. Oh, actually, I got the date wrong. It's 1914. And then finally, when that didn't happen, he said, oh, actually, no, it did happen, but in a non-visible way. Jesus came, but not in a way that he could be seen. Oh, cut the shit, man. So here was Zevi doing the same thing. The same exact frickin' thing. Because it's all Jewish. These tactics parallel each other because they come from the same source, of course. So that's what Zevi was doing here. People were disappointed. Wait, this guy must not be the Messiah. He was supposed to come in 1648. He just changed the date, hoping that he could bring about his insurrectionist movement just in time for the year 1666. And don't forget, guys, in that year, all kinds of shit was going down. There was there was a plague unleashed in London. There was a great fire that broke out in London, right? Classic Jewish fingerprints. Anyway, and this was all at the time when Jews were being allowed back into England, right? Zevi and his buddies behind the scenes were helping to orchestrate this through Cromwell, their little puppet. And so, within the Jewish community, that was seen as a sign, too. This must be the Messiah. He's coming right at the time when Jews are being given emancipation across the board, Anyway, so things were at a fever pitch again among the Jews of Europe for the appearance of their little precious Messiah. things were happening in the political world that looked promising, that looked like God's hand was moving in great ways. Zevi must have exulted in this, knowing that the rabbis of Smyrna dare not attempt to condemn him again. So he realized, I got the people behind me. The same tactics Jesus was using, right? But it wasn't just the rabbis of Smyrna that had rejected him. The rabbis of Salonika, headed by Rabbi Haya Abraham de Bolton, had also banished him from that city. But this didn't thwart him, nor did it even slightly slow him down or his fan club. He was so confident now that the rabbis could, distance themselves from him all they wanted. He had the people. And that was the first century insurrectionist movement's attitude as well. That was their intent, to turn the people against the rabbis, not just the Romans, the rabbis. The rabbis were traitors because they couldn't be brought around to their cause. Anyway, some Jews, so overwhelmed with adoration for Zevi, abandoned their houses and property at this time, refusing to do any work and claiming that the Messiah would soon carry them on a cloud to Jerusalem. How classic. How many times we've seen this in the Christian world, right? In the New Testament, Peter, James, John preached sermons on this about selling all that you have. Just like Christ had said, right? If you're my true disciple, go and sell all you have and give to the poor. So now Peter was picking that up and saying, yeah, sell all you have. And he was telling them to take the money from those sales and put it into a common kitty, and then we'll divide it up among you. Fucking communism, right? And so you don't have to be a genius to figure out what was going on there. Peter was claiming that we need to have all things common, not ultra rich and ultra poor. So put everything into this common kitty, and then I will divide it up among you evenly. He'd take his big fucking cut and then divide it up so everybody had almost nothing. Yeah, absolutely. There's your communism for you. And so this is what was going on here. People were abandoning their homes so Zevi and his buddies could swoop down and scoop them up. You won't need them anyway. We'll just use this for the Lord's cause. The Lord's cause. That's the famous mantra of televangelists today, isn't it? I remember years ago, guys, as the Bible do, on a few occasions, I would be in this church or that church, and the minister would be talking about, it's a good idea if some of you out there, are in your retirement years and you're planning your wills and whatnot. If you don't have any family members, to give your house to, meet me after church and I can give you an application right from the local conference office here where you can pledge your home to the conference after you pass. This would be a great service to the Lord. Many times I heard preachers did, because they were prompted to do this by the central office, right? And they were all too willing. They probably got a kickback from it too, for how many people they could convince to sign their homes over. Yeah, we'll give you 5%. Fucking disgusting, right? And so this is the shit Zevi was doing too. Sell your homes, abandon your homes, never mind your commitments at home. Your wife wants you to mow the lawn. Tell her to go to hell because you're following me now, and this is all that matters. I'm going to fly you on a cloud to Jerusalem. Yeah, whatever. Others fasted for days, denying food, even to their children, because they thought that everything's going to be straightened out soon. We're all going to be fully fed and clothed and, following Zevi. He's going to bring us all to Jerusalem, gather us all together, and Jerusalem is going to be set up as the headquarters of world government. That's really what they thought. This is what Jews had always been taught. This is what the Torah teaches. The whole Old Testament, guys, I pointed out passage after passage after passage. I will bring all nations before you. They'll bow before you and lick the dust from the soles of your feet. This is what Jews in the first century who followed crackpots like Judas Christus or Jesus Christ, this is what they were hoping was going to come to fruition in their day. Didn't happen. This is what followers of Zevi thought was going to happen in their day. Didn't happen. Oh, but in 1948, when Jewland was set up again, oh, yes, a lot of Jews were thinking that very soon now, Jewish world government is going to be set up. Didn't happen in that time frame, but there's still a lot of Jews, a lot of Christians, right? The Zionist Christians that are looking forward to Israel being fully set up with the temple being restored, and that will bring about Jesus' second coming. Same shit that Zevi was getting people hyped up over. So yeah, you had people fasting, denying their own kids food, and during that severe winter that followed, many had bathed in ice holes. What a bunch of ice holes they were. While at the same time reciting a recently composed prayer, apparently as a form of something akin to penance, right? By bathing in ice, they were demonstrating their faith to Yahweh, like penance, punishing themselves in cold water to prove, just like the fasting too, right? What is fasting? But making yourself suffer to get Yahweh's favor. And Yahweh loved it. Don't forget, in the Old Testament, Yahweh told the ancient Israelites on numerous occasions not only to fast, but to mourn. There was one time, some of you might recall, I was when I did a series on fasting, where Yahweh rebuked the Israelites and he said, yes, you have fasted, but you have not mourned enough. Cut the shit. So the son of a bitch in the clouds not only wants you to deprive yourself of food and suffer hunger pangs and malnutrition, but he wants you to mourn in the process. By the way, fasting can be beneficial, not for days and days and days on end without anything, as Yahweh taught, but, and don't forget, this is in the desert, right? How long can you go without any food or water? Fucking stupid, man. I wonder how many people actually died back then from fasting. Probably quite a few. Anyway, faint-hearted and destitute Christians, hearing the stories of the miracles performed by Messiah Zevi and beholding the boundless arrogance of the Jews, began to doubt Christ, and that was his intention, right? There were some Christians who either were joining ranks or at least considering joining ranks with this guy, or just outright gave up on religion altogether and wound up, not following Christ anymore because they were thinking that, wow, we don't see anything like this within the Christian world. Why is this happening within Judaism? It looks like either Christianity is a complete failure, or the other crowd would think that, well, God is moving in their religion and not ours, so that must be where it's at. And of course, they had this idea already pumped into their head that the Jews are God's chosen people, even though they're not accepting Jesus right now. So maybe God is resurrecting his chosen people now. I'm going to join ranks with them. This is what Zevi was hoping. And it was happening to some degree. Like Messiah Christ, or Christus, Zevi was also, of course, an insurrectionist, or at least endeavored to be one. He did make some attempts at uprisings, didn't quite go the way he wanted. He was hoping, though, to accomplish what Christ was hoping to accomplish, a full-fledged uprising, an overturning of the current function of society in favor of his followers, marching into Jerusalem and setting up the Jew world order under his direction. He sought to begin his work of redemption by dethroning the Sultan of Turkey, who at that time ruled over the Holy Land, And again, this is what the first century insurrectionist movement was trying to do. Kick the Romans out of Judea so they could claim the land for themselves. Then later, march right into Rome and take it over. But first, step one, take over Judea. So that's what he was hoping to do here. Take over the Sultan right there in Turkey, who was the lord over Jerusalem. If you can take him out, now Jerusalem isn't going to be ruled by him anymore. Now it's open season on who's going to control that. And so after they overtook him, their aim was to go to Jerusalem now and set up the Jew world order. 2 days before the beginning of the year 1666, he departed for Constantinople, where he was to do his messianic work. But upon his arrival there, he was imprisoned and then sent to the fortress of Abydos in Gallipoli. Oops, something went wrong. Just like Christ, guys, everything looked good. They marched in the streets and sang Hosanna, watching him ride through in his donkey. And Christ thought, oh, I got it in the bag now. All of these other guys failed. They must be jealous of me. I'm succeeding in setting myself up as king, right? But then when he got arrested a few days later in the Garden of Gethsemane, a much bigger group of Roman soldiers came to arrest him than what he had anticipated. The Romans weren't stupid. They knew what he was doing. And the whole thing went belly up. And so it was here with Mr. Zevi. He thought he had it in the bag. He had a very large following. Nothing can stop me now. And then he gets arrested. Anyway, the strength of his support, though, was so great that the prison was transformed into a royal residence to which Jews from all over the world had flocked, bearing gifts for Mr. Zevi. He still was arrested, but it became quite the charade because, he was getting so many visitors, and now there was pressure on, what are we going to do with this guy now? Zevi had become the spiritual leader of hundreds of thousands of people at the time. The Turks struck on a plan suggested, interestingly enough, by a Jewish advisor to the Sultan to make the Sabbatean movement ineffective. It was at this point that Zevi was confronted with the option of death or public conversion to Islam. That was the way to, turn this thing around. So we'll either kill you and end this whole movement, and people will see that you couldn't have been the Messiah because you died, just like with Jesus, right? But of course, they just invented the idea that he survived the crucifixion, that he rose again, right, to keep the religion going. If they had killed him, maybe they would have done that with him too. Claimed that he was taken up to heaven. Who knows? That's how this fucking religion works. But anyway, he opted for the save my ass option and converted to Islam. But he reasoned that, hey, maybe this will work in my favor too. I can get a bunch of Muslims following me too, blah, blah, blah. Nevertheless, though, this wasn't going according to the way he originally planned. But in the Jew world, guys, there's always a backup plan. And even if you don't have it thought of ahead of time, the way they operate, right? Their mind starts turning. How can I use this against my enemies? And so, yeah, the plan was, sure, I'll convert. I'll not only save my ass, but I can infiltrate Islam now and amass a bunch of followers there. He was even told that he could go through the motions of conversion as a pretense, but that the action had to be done publicly and convincingly. They didn't care whether he was genuinely converting or not. It's just the message that they want sent to the people. You get it? That's how politics always works, isn't it? Just go through the motions, sucker the people. Jews many times over the years have told political leaders, their little minions, oh yeah, since the people are against Jews, you can speak against Jews all you want. get real flamboyant about it, denounce Jews as the ultimate source of evil. And even if it encourages some people to rise up and kill some Jews, we don't care. They're not going to come after us at the top. They're only going to go after some low-level Jews. We don't care about them. And so many political leaders have done just that. Winston Churchill did it. Adolf Hitler did it. And yet they were their minions. So in November of 1666, toward the end of the year for which the redemption was scheduled by Zevi himself, Zevi became, albeit superficially, a Muslim in full pomp and ceremony. He was given a Muslim name, Mehmet Effendi, and appointed a chamberlain to the Sultan with a handsome salary, designed, no doubt, to keep him pliant with the Sultan. But notice this, in a lot of ways, though, even though he had this scheme, I'll amass a bunch of Muslim followers, this totally fucked up his plans, right? Because he wanted to overtake the Sultan and march right into Jerusalem. Now he's thinking, shit, this isn't going to happen in the time frame I wanted. It was supposed to be now, 1666. What am I going to do? Am I going to reinvent the time scale again to keep my followers? Because they're already disappointed about the 1648 thing not happening, right? Now he's got to explain why the 1666 prediction isn't coming to fruition. Fuck, man. But look how mindless the masses are, Jewish and Gentile alike, right? You just wave your magic wand and claim to be sent by God and quote from the sacred texts a few times here and there to give it weight, and people are going to follow you. It's pretty sad, isn't it? As long as you don't have a conscience, guys, you can make an easy living by sitting on your ass and doing nothing. The money will flow your way if you just sell your soul and have no conscience and know how to bullshit people. Familiarize yourself with the sacred text that the people are enamored with, and you can get them to believe anything. It's fucking disgusting, man. Disgusting that there are people that do this, but even more disgusting that the masses are so easily suckered into stuff like this. Anyway, like Christ, or the Christ character, Judas Christus, Zevi was a bum who leeched off of others who supported him and his disciples financially. Never worked a day in his fucking life. He just parasited off of his supporters that gave contributions. But even before he could get to that point, he parasited off of wealthy people that he convinced to finance his operation. And this is what Christ did, right? Christ was a bum. He never fucking worked a day in his life. And yet he was never short on cash, right? Everywhere he went, he had his little treasury bag that was always getting filled. He was getting big handouts from his supporters out of Galilee. Remember the story in the book of John? He goes to this very affluent wedding that was well attended, had very expensive wine. That was one of his rich supporters for his insurrectionist movement. Never was short of cash. He said himself, I have no place to live. And so Christians will cite that to say, no, he didn't have money. He didn't even have his own house. He didn't need his own house. Everywhere he went, his fat ass was cared for. He was given the finest meals, the finest places to sleep. People opened their homes to him. But yet he could have bought a house if he wanted to. He had plenty of cash. But no, he didn't need to. He knew his needs were provided for him everywhere he went. He knew where the Essenes were that would open their doors to him. At first, he had no aversion to them, right? Later, as he got bigger and bigger, now he broke from them because he realized, I don't need them anymore now. He could stand on his own now. He had enough people supporting him that he didn't need to, depend on them anymore. Anyway, one of Zevi's biggest supporters was a man that he met in Cairo, Raphael Joseph Halabi, a wealthy and influential Jew who held the high position of mint master and tax farmer under the Ottoman government. Interesting title, tax farmer. Yeah, they're farming people, all right. But notice he was also the mint master at the same time. Yeah, figures that they would appoint those positions to a Jew. Anyway, and don't forget the advisor, too. The top advisor to the Sultan was also a fucking Jew. That was almost always the case, guys. All throughout Muslim history, the top sultans had Jewish advisors. Every time. Anyway, Halabi led an ascetic life, which included fasting, bathing in cold water. Again, a Jewish version of penance, right? And scourging himself at night. Again, there's your penance, right? Where do you think the Catholic Church got that from? When I say Jewish version of penance, penance really is Jewish. It's the Catholic Church that, adopted this from Judaism. So there he was, engaging in all this horse shit, bathing in cold water, scourging himself, whipping himself, right? And he used his great wealth for Jewish charity. Oh, wow. When has that not been the case, where wealthy Jews give money for charity, but only to their Jewish community, nobody else? Where have we seen that before? That's always been the case, guys. He specifically supported poor Talmudists and Kabbalists, that sector of Judaism, 50 of whom reportedly dined at his table regularly. He became one of Zevi's chief supporters and promoters, helping greatly to advance his messianic claims and aims, because he was a third factionist like himself, right? It didn't matter that he preached from the Torah, because he knew that he wasn't a true Torahist. He was only doing that to deceive people. He knew he was a third factionist fan of the Kabbalah. So that's why he was supporting him, just like Christ, right? A third factioner. Anyway, but financial support alone would not have sufficed for Zevi's rise to messianic status. He also needed prominent moral support, which he got from, more than any other person, a man named Nathan Benjamin Levy, who was known simply as Nathan of Gaza, whom Zevi met while visiting Gaza on one occasion. He became very active in Zevi's messianic career, serving as his right-hand man and declaring himself to be the risen Elijah. Oh, where have we seen that before? At the time of Christ, it was said that John the Baptist was Elijah, right? And Christ even confirmed it. Christ called John the Baptist Elijah. He said he is Elijah. Whatever. Because he knew that would get the masses following him, because they would go back and look at the prophecies that Yahweh would send Elijah, right? Christ ultimately, hated John the Baptist, right? And surely played a role in his demise. He wanted to get rid of him, get him out of the picture, so he could be the all-in-one Messiah and not have to answer to the priestly Messiah, John the Baptist. No. But initially, though, he called him John the Baptist so that, he could get people enamored with him and John as being initially the dual messiahship, the kingly and the priestly messiahs. Anyway, so Mr. Nathan of Gaza was propping himself up as Elijah being sent by God to pave the way for Messiah Zevi, just like John the Baptist was being propped up as Elijah to pave the way for Christ, right? At least that's how the Gospels portray it. But look at the parallel here. You got to love it, man. In 1665, Nathan of Gaza announced that the Messianic age would begin in 1666 with the conquest of the world without bloodshed. He actually said that. He was confident enough that this Messianic movement was going to take the world by storm, not just the Jew world, the Christian and the Muslim world, right? He would amass enough followers that the whole world would fall into their hands, into the third faction's hands, at, the behest of Mr. Zevi and his little sidekick, Nathan of Gaza, without bloodshed, which is pretty much how the Russian Revolution played out, right? Without bloodshed. They got the people so angry at the government when in fact it was actually the Jewish factory owners that were oppressing the workers, right? But I'll be talking about that down the line on my Christendom 2 channel, how they pulled off the Russian Revolution essentially without bloodshed. It just fell into their hands through propagandic bullshit. And so that's what was being hoped here. They had done it enough times in the past. They were confident we can do it again. Didn't quite play out this time for them the way that they had hoped, but they had done it enough times. They felt pretty confident that they would be able to pull it off again. Nathan also stated that the Messiah would lead the 10 lost tribes back to the Holy Land, riding on a lion with a 7-headed dragon in its jaws. That sounds very much like the beast of Revelation 13, the 7-headed dragon, right? Anyway, but notice how he talked about gathering the 10 lost tribes. That's what Christ was all about, right? I came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That was understood to mean, the scattered 10 tribes. He wanted to bring them back to overawe the Roman presence there and take back Jewland, set it up as the headquarters of, ultimately of world government. Anyway, Nathan of Gaza had prophesied, quote unquote, that as soon as Zevi entered Constantinople, he would place the Sultan's crown on his own head. It was because of this claim that Zevi was arrested as soon as he later set foot in Constantinople, as I mentioned a little while back, because of this claim. So his little sidekick kind of backfired things on him. 2 months later, he was transferred to another prison in Abydos, as I mentioned, but this only served to make him, even more popular, right? Because people were flocking to visit him in prison and see what his latest instructions were. Jews everywhere were now gathering in public to send out prayers on his behalf. In almost every synagogue, his initials were posted, and one prayer offered on his behalf stated, quote, "Bless our Lord and King, the holy and righteous Sabbatai Zevi, the Messiah of the God of Jacob." Unbelievable, man. Our Lord and King. Very similar titles to what was afforded Christ, right? Or Judas Christus. Drawings of his image were also depicted in Jewish prayer books distributed abroad, alongside depictions of King David. Remember the medals that were minted in Israel a few years back under Dumpy Act 1, where they had Dumpy's image on one side and King Cyrus's image on the other? Another great hero of Judaism? Anyways. All right, guys, we're past the hour mark here. I'll stop there, and I'll be able to finish this up in probably just a half an hour or so to finish up the rest of these notes on Mr. Zevi And then we'll look at some other branches of Judaism that have arisen over the ensuing centuries, all grown out of the Sabbatian or Sabbatean movement, ultimately leading up to Chabad, the most extremist and despicable of all of them. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. We'll catch you in part 3. Take care.